Welcome to the Stressless Eating Podcast, where we help diet-obsessed and food-crazed women break themselves out of the food and body prison, end the dieting madness, and take control of their health for good. I'm your host, Leanne Ellington, and this podcast is about answering one question. How can you heal your relationship with food and your body and take a practical approach to this whole self-love journey, but without all that restriction, obsession, and shame, and without needing years of therapy to do so? If you want to know the answer, you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe to and review our podcast.
Awesome. Hello. Well, we are here today. Hello, it's Carol. My amazing client, Carol, has, just agreed to share her journey, share her story, share her truths. And this is a vulnerable share for you, Carol. You are, when we first met, you would, have described yourself as an introvert, and speaking up in a crowd is a big deal. So thank you. Extra special thank you for just being here to share your truth. I think it's just a testament of how far you've come in your relationship with yourself to even be here. Yeah?
Yes, definitely. I'm used to public speaking in my career, but when it's your personal life, it's a little bit different. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to go ahead and dive on in. If you could just, for anybody who's listening, just kind of share a little bit about, where you were before you started the program. Like, what was your life like? What was your relationship with yourself like? What was your relationship with food in your body like? What was a typical, day in the life of you? Where were you before we met?
Mm-hmm. Well, in thinking back, I thought about food all the time. Whether it was good thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever. I was very depressed. I was lonely. I was extremely anxious. So much so that I had seen my doctor about that, and she had prescribed some medication for me to kind of help me not be so anxious. I had given up on dieting because I just thought it doesn't work for me anymore, and this is just the way it's going to be. I worried constantly. About if you can worry about it, I worried about it. I did not like myself at all, and I was ashamed of myself. I was probably what some people would call a real bitch.
To yourself.
Yes, I was and I remember telling you this when we first got started. I truly was my own worst enemy. I was really, really good at all of that. Yeah. So that in a nutshell, I had very little self-confidence. That was a big change for me because I've always been in the past, I'd been very self-confident. So it was just a lot of things feeding off of all kinds of things. So
yeah. And just to kind of, I know there was just a bell was just giving you the encouragement in the background just now, or a grandfather clock or something. But like if it, basically what I hear you say is like your emotional home was that anxiety, that depression, that self-consciousness, that self-judgment, to the point where you even, went to the doctor and said, hey, I think I need some help,
Right.
Yeah. And so what was your relationship with your body like? How was this spilling over into other areas of your life?
Well, I really couldn't stand the way I looked. I was super critical of everything about myself. And I'm sure that spilled over to all kinds of aspects in my life. I just was so negative about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so was that affecting your relationships or your work? Like, how were you showing up in every other area of your life? Like, what version of you were you walking into the room as?
I was not the real version of me. Just to give a little retrospect, my husband and I moved to where we live now. We made a move to a totally different city several years ago, and he travels full time for his job, or he did then. Mm-hmm. And so we lived in a wonderful area, wonderful town, but I basically had no friends. I thought nobody wanted to be my friend. Yeah. And because I was alone physically in this new town, I think that just compounded things, that it just ate away at me. And and then I got in the food thing. I'd eat because I was lonely. I'd eat because I was sad. And it just, it just snowballed. Yeah. So I was not my own best self by any means. And then when my husband would come home on the weekends, because I was so happy that he was here, because he truly is the most important person in my life, that, then I kind of tried to hide how I really felt about things. And so I'm sure that it really was detrimental to me being able to make new friends and to have self-confidence and to be able to assimilate in a new area.
Yeah.
And then hadn't done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's almost like when you moved to this new city, you were face to face with your struggles. Like you couldn't hide in any of your normal rituals or routines. Like it was kind of dead center of your awareness. And then also, this is for anybody who's watching this, when you reached out to me, I think it was in April. And like we were a month into this worldwide pandemic where there was so much uncertainty. Mm-hmm. Like what was your life? Like how did the pandemic or the beginning of it magnify that experience for you, or was it the thing that kind of made you choose to do something different? Like how did the pandemic kind of play into it for you?
Well, honestly, I think the pandemic for me and my husband in an extremely selfish way has been a really wonderful thing for us. He no longer travels, so I'm in a very selfish way. I'm very happy that he's here, but it also I think I was to the point, and especially when the pandemic started and you just start thinking about things in such a different way, because at least I did, because our world was just in such a mess. And I just remember thinking day after day for several weeks, I have to change. Something has to change. And I think it needs to start with me. And, it wasn't anybody else's responsibility. And I knew that. And I just knew that there had to be something better, but I had no idea what it was at that point.
I think that's so powerful, because I think, a lot of people looked at the quarantine as like almost a reason or an excuse of like why they felt so out of control. And something inside of you like triggered and said, hey, like this, it has to start with me. Like this is something I do need to kind of get a hold of, but mm-hmm. Also, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too, like going in, on Facebook or social media, like there's these memes that are like, oh, I gained the quarantine 15. And it's kind of like this ha-ha, but it's actually really serious. So many people are suffering with, it's not just about the physical health and the weight gain and all that. It's this emotional and mental torment that's going on because we're face to face with our struggles and feeling like there's no way out of that prison. And I just want to, salute you, because again, we all know lots of people who use it as a reason to go deeper into a hole, and there's no judgment about that at all either. Like we're all on our own journey.
Right.
It takes a certain amount of, almost intuition or just like really commitment to yourself to know like, no, this is the time. Like this is the time. Like when else am I going to have this much time and space and all that? So really just kudos to you for that. So how has your life changed as a result of enrolling in the program and really showing up to do this kind of work?
Oh, my life is so much better and so different in such a positive way. You know, when I talked to my husband about being part of the stressless eating program, you know, he knew what struggles that I had been having, and he said, I told him I didn't talk so much about the eating. I just talked about I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to be a better wife, a better mother, sister, friend. And so I was really committed to that when I started working with you. And I found you through a webinar, and I watched that. And I don't even know why I watched it, other than something said to me, this is important for you to watch this. Mm-hmm. And I did. And you talked about all these things that I swear it was like you were on my shoulder and you were reading my mind, you know, and I get emotional about this.
I just got goosebumps. Yeah.
You know, you talked about how a person feels matters, that you're not broken. And I really felt broken. And I wanted to be fixed. But I had a feeling it was going to have to be me that fixed myself. My husband loves me and is a wonderful person, but he can't fix me. So after I checked you out on Google, oh, sorry, I realized that you really were legit. And we had our phone call, and I just felt like, oh, wow, I think this person could help me become a better person. So that was the beginning of all of that. Yeah. I don't remember the question.
No, it's so, you brought up such an important point though. Like, you know, so many women that are stuck in this cycle, they think because it's front of mind awareness, it's all they think about is like food and the overeating and the shame. They think it's a food problem. And you brought up such an important part. You're like, for me, like the food was really, and I'll use my language, but it was just a symptom. You're like, you knew that emotionally you were trapped in some sort of prison where you were not showing up as, it was like the identity of who you saw in your head was not the identity of who you knew you could be and who you know you already are, you know, but you were trapped, and then food and the diet cycle was just the kind of offshoot of that.
Right.
And you mentioned things like you were, you know, in anxiety and depression, and you know, one of the things I do believe that there are some people that have a chemical like a diagnosed, like it's a chemical kind of misfiring in the brain that's causing depression, and a chemical misfiring in the brain that's causing anxiety. And that goes for a number of different things as well. But then I truly believe that there is a series of thoughts and habits and beliefs and actions that equal depression. It's almost like a recipe. Like I know that if I put eggs and flour and sugar and brown sugar and chocolate chips and vanilla extract in a bowl, I'm going to come up with chocolate chip cookie dough. That's just part of my secret recipe. But if I put that in, it's going to be chocolate chip cookies every single time, you know? And that is what we do. It's a recipe of habits and beliefs and thoughts that create depression. Mm-hmm. And there's a recipe for anxiety. And I remember on our call, I said, hey, are you open to the possibility that you're not actually depressed and that you're not actually anxious, but that you've been practicing a recipe for depression and anxiety? And you were like, that would be amazing. If that was, you know, and that's a big part of what we did is we just looked at your recipes, like the thoughts, the feelings, the actions. And it's not a coincidence that you're not experiencing depression and not experiencing anxiety but most people think like, this is who I am. I am depression. I am anxiety. I am broken. There's something wrong with me. I'm crazy. And, you know, the reason I was able to get inside the conversation inside your head is because it's the conversation that was in my head for most of my life. It's in the conversation that's going on in most of my clients' heads and minds and eyes. And it's what I'm here on this earth to create, because when I was going through it, the world was throwing more diets at me. The world was throwing more, you know, therapy and like, hey, go psychoanalyze your struggles to death, but let's not come up with a solution. the world was throwing more short-term Band-Aids at a really internal emotional struggle, or a logical solution to an emotional struggle. So I think you're speaking to so many people. So if anybody here is listening thinking like, hey, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, like there is a possibility for some of that some places, but I think that 99% of anxiety and depression is actually just a recipe that we've been practicing and we've been baking at 350 degrees on for years. Right. And it can be, it's not a matter of it's unpracticing it, but practicing like, what's your anti-anxiety recipe? What's your peace? What's your health and self-care? And it's not just a physical conversation. So thank you for sharing your truth. Like, I got emotional too when you shared it, because it really is. It's a powerful testament. It shows how much can transform, not just change, and just when you're committed and when you have a new recipe to bake,
Right.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. So why do you think this was different than any of the other programs that you've ever tried, or any of the attempts that you've made? Why was this different?
Well, I've thought about that a lot. I'm a lifetime Weight Watchers member. I've done Jenny Craig, clean eating, all of that. And I was a good participant, but I followed the rules, but nobody asked me in any of that, what works for you? And they just said, this works, go do it. And so I think the biggest difference for me has been that through you and your program, I came up with my own recipe, like you talked about, and that it's mine. It's not yours. It's not anybody else's. And it's what makes me who I am now, and that might include thinking about food. And it probably doesn't have anything to do with food, usually, any of the components of my recipes. So I have to say that the work that I did in the first 3 weeks of the program, I'm 65 years old, and if I had done those things way earlier, it would have made such a huge difference in my life. But that's in the past, and the future is even brighter, because I came up with my recipe. I'm peaceful, I'm calm, and I really like myself now. I just really like myself.
Yeah. Peaceful, calm. I really like myself. Like, that is the opposite of anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
And it's the thing that we just never knew was even possible, because we get so stuck in it. And you mentioned the first 3 weeks, a lot of women, again, that come to me think they have a food problem. And it's like, no, when you address all this other stuff and you carve out this new identity, and don't get me wrong, I want everyone to have a better system of thinking around food and the choices that they make. Right. But really, when you do that stuff, the other stuff is simple, simple, not easy. But the food stuff, we touch on it a little bit in the first few weeks.
Yeah.
We really don't get into it until probably about halfway through that program. Our first actual food experiment is in module 6. And it's just like one of those things where when you show up as the version of yourself that is calm and relaxed, and you're emotionally available to yourself.
Right.
You're not feeding it with food or Netflix or whatever it is. And we all have our drug of choice, our own cocktail, But when you're emotionally available to yourself, you like yourself. Because I truly believe that everyone, to a certain extent, we all love ourselves, but we struggle to like ourselves.
Right.
We're mad at ourselves. We've lost our own respect. We've lost our own trust. And then we've just fired and wired using food and Netflix and Instagram and all that to feed that. And so when you come through that, it's like everything else. Again, it's simple, not easy. You still have to do the work to reprogram your relationship with food, but then it's just it just flows.
Right. And I never had anybody ask me, how do I want to feel? It was like, here's how you're going to feel if you do this, this, and this. So if I didn't feel that way or whatever, then I was even deeper in the whole being ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just felt from the moment I started doing the work and talking with you and everything, I just felt so free and very at peace. You know?
Yeah. And I love how you said, like, right when you started doing the work, a lot of people have a misconception in their mind that it's going to be dark and deep and painful, that they, you know, especially if you've been dealing with this. I mean, you've been a lifelong dieter, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, you don't have to. I mean, and again, there's a time and place for therapy. And I've actually done a whole episode on my podcast about why therapy doesn't work for most food and body struggles. But, you know, really oftentimes it can be very regressive. Like, we've psychoanalyzed it to death, like our childhood struggles, why we have mommy or daddy issues, whatever it is, you know what I mean? But it doesn't give us a forward thinking solution. It keeps us struggling in the past, but also, like you mentioned it to you, like, when somebody gives you a recipe, not only is it a do this, don't do this, not only does that not work long term because it doesn't actually take care of what we need, and we are this individual experiment, you know. But then, like you said, it's like when you fail, and you will, because it's not a sustainable thing, you feel even more shame because you're like, wait a minute, this is proven, air quotes, proven to work, and I can't even hack this, you know. But the other thing is, like, when somebody gives you this cookie cutter one size fits all, it's never going to work. Your brain is never going to have that resonance that it needs to own it. And you need a recipe. And part of that means we have to become our own advocate. Like, nobody can be an expert in your health. Nobody can be an expert in your emotional well-being. And we think that a doctor or a therapist or some air quotes expert is supposed to be our expert. Yes, get an expert to guide you towards figuring out what your recipe is. But if anybody ever tries to tell you what you need or what your recipe is, I invite people to run, don't walk. You need to figure out what that looks like for you. It's got to be created, and it can be co-created. Like, we obviously went back and forth a lot and gave you a lot of feedback and pointed you in different directions and helped you see what might have been in your blind spot, but it was your recipe. And now you get to have it. And it's a kind of process that grows and evolves as you do, because now you might need a different recipe for a different area of your life, but the same tools and systems will resonate in different areas of your life.
And you teach about the science of things, which I think was really important to me. I mean, I'm inquisitive in that way, and I want facts to back up why I'm doing something or why I'm not doing something. And I think that has helped me a lot. You know, like the whole talking about you have to refire your brain and your nervous system. I mean, it's absolutely true. And, you know, nobody ever has talked to me about those things in the past. And it really, really works.
Yeah. And I went to an exercise class not that long ago. And they were talking about how all the program design was done by exercise scientists. And through my nervous system eyes, I was like, this is dangerous to the nervous system. And I don't ever want to participate in this again. And people do throw around words of like science-based and science-backed and all that. And like, to be honest, like, you can't talk about your musculoskeletal system, your gastrointestinal system, your hormones, any of that without talking about the nervous system, you know? And so that's why I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to teach my clients the how, I want them to know the why, so that it's not just a matter of taking my word for it. I want them to own it and it makes sense. Because yes, it's an emotional struggle and it needs an emotional solution, but you guys also need the logic-based reasoning behind it so that you can, you know, air quotes, buy into it so that you can own it and it resonates and it sticks, you know? So I love that was a big part of the puzzle for you too. Cause I am too. I'm kind of like a skeptic. I'm like a scientist with a splash of woo, you know, like I love all the emotional stuff and the kind of like energetic stuff and all that. But I'm like, I need to know the science behind it because it needs to land. It needs to logically make sense to me. And I think a lot of people watching this interview or listening to this are in the same boat, you know? So why do you think this was more successful than anything that you've ever done before?
I Well, as I alluded to already, it's my recipe that, your program and guidance helped me develop. But some of the ways that, working in minimums, not maximums. I mean, I still have some of that maximum stuff in my brain. Even the other day when you and I talked and I asked you a question, I was like, oh, that was really maximums, not minimums. So, I'm not lazy, but it's so much better when you think of things in minimums, not maximums, and that whole abundance mentality that, that is just was so different than anything that I had incorporated in my life before. And figuring out what brings me joy, it might not even matter to you. It might not matter to my next door neighbor, my friends, whatever. It probably doesn't matter to them what brings me joy, but it's really, really important to me. And I have so much more joy now than I ever did. And the whole inner compass to peace and my own personal mission statement. I mean, I worked really hard on that. And nobody had ever asked me some of those questions. And that's nobody's fault. But it's just nobody had ever asked me to think about those things, those ways. And I really got into it. And I really, really cherish that work that I did. And I read it every day. It's part of my daily gratitude work that also has become a big part of who I am now through being part of the program, and just kind of incorporating that you can't forget about the physical side of your being. You have to incorporate physical, social, emotional, mental, all of that. And so that was a very long-winded answer. So.
No, it's great. And it's so helpful because you bring up such really important points. One of the things that you mentioned is you're like, oh yeah, like my brain, even after all this time, like my brain went back into maximums, and you were immediately aware of it. Like on our call, you were like, oh my gosh, oh wait. And because that's the thing, this stuff never ends. I too, like we've been indoctrinated into thinking it's this like 0 to 60, harder, faster, more, no pain, no gain mentality. And so it's not that old stuff, even with the self-judgment and all that, like it's not like any of that old stuff ever just like totally goes away, but we just respond to it differently. And we see it with this like curiosity, and we're like, oh, I see what I did there. And it's this kind of like loving curiosity rather than judgment or shame. And it's not that this stuff ever goes away. That's why we build the inner compass and the mission statement. One of the things I'm always telling you ladies is like, hey, here's one of the things we can count on is that these old habits and patterns are going to show up. This self-talk is going to show up. It becomes a matter of who we choose to be in the face of it, and then giving ourselves breadcrumbs when we need to go back. And that's why the tools, a lot of, personal development programs that I went through, and even diets and weight loss programs, everything was in a bubble. It was like assuming that like the metaphorical grilled chicken and broccoli was possible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just like you're in this bubble, and it's like, yeah, when you're in a bubble, everything is easy. But what happens when things get hard? What happens when curveballs hit? What happens when a pandemic hits? And I memean, you've been in the program, you know that there's people that we've had in our program that have had deaths in the family. Right before you enrolled, we had somebody that had her children were in a mall where there was a terrorist attack. Her children were fine, but that was trauma for her. And, people right now, literally one of our gals is dealing with all of the wildfires out in California, like these things that you can't expect. It's not part of the grilled chicken and broccoli bubble. And then it's like, who do we want to be in the face of all of that? And that's, you bring up such really powerful points. Like it's a lifelong journey, and it's about getting those tools that'll support you for the rest of your life. It's not just about the right now,
Right. I neglected to mention one of the most powerful things that I learned early on was separating the data from the drama. And, I dreamt up all kinds of drama, but now it's like, wait, just a second here. Here's the data. Here are the facts. And the rest of that, if you choose to go down that road, is drama, and it's not necessary,
Absolutely. There's so much talk out there about like, oh, just think positively and just like change your mindset to positive thinking. And it's like, wait a minute, if I've conditioned myself to speak that way for years, I can't just positive think my way through that. The brain doesn't work that way. You need tools such as the data versus the drama and some of the other tools that we've learned along the way, and they're tools, not rules. Because rules can be used to judge and shame yourself. They're just tools, and it's just like, and they're so just grabbable and manageable and easy to just put wrap your heart around.
Right. And I have them forever now. Yeah. And I've actually used several of them in conversations with my friends or my family members, And yeah, it's not, it's forever, which is a huge part of it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it just speaks to this idea that it's not about food. It's about all the other stuff, like having a new, just kind of language with which to speak to ourselves and live our lives, and a new paradigm to live in.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Oh, so excited for you. So why do you believe it was worth it to really invest to get the help that you actually needed, rather than go down more of, the diet weight loss approaches or the short-term Band-Aid fix kind of conversations? Like, why was it really worth it for you to invest your time, your energy, your finances, all that, to really heal this for good?
Because I feel I have my new improved self for the rest of my life now. It's mine. It's mine to use with all those tools that I've been given. I just feel like I'm not on the sideline of my life waiting for things to happen anymore. And I have food freedom. I have all those tools. As I said earlier, I can use them for myself in my relationships, and hopefully it's just going to become better and better, which I'm looking forward to, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to kind of speak to that, like you said, have your recipe and you have your food freedom. Is it anything that's like that when you look at it, is it one of those things where it's like, crap, that's going to be really hard for me to upkeep because it's taking so much time and energy and force and persuasion? Or is it one of those things where you can see based on the amount of energy that you're putting on it, it does get easier the more that you practice it?
I think it gets easier. It was never hard. It was just,
different.
It was so different. And as I got, towards the end of the 12 weeks, I think I told you, I was kind of worried, like, whoa, am I supposed to be doing something here that I'm not doing? And then I just realized, no, I just need to live into this now and use different tools that I have and just kind of find my way. And so I appreciated that I could do that as well.
Yeah.
It just permeates everything that I do now and how I think or what I don't choose to think about. And, it's just so much better that it just makes me so happy.
You look at
and I'm
you're
sure my
glowing.
husband would tell you that he's much happier.
Yes, everybody gets this better version of us when we show up and pour that into ourselves. Yeah, and yeah, it's for anybody who's curious, the program is set up to be descending intensity, meaning it's a bit more time and energy intensive on the front end, and it descends because that's how the brain works. Where our brain isn't meant to go 0 to 60, ever, but really for that unmarked amount of time, it needs to taper off. But also, the big fundamentals are really, even I don't want to say it doesn't take 12 weeks, but like the big meat of it is in the first 6 weeks. And then the rest is really just integration. Because the idea is we want it to become a system of thinking that you practice that, you have to intensively invest in getting the reps in the beginning. But, unlike dieting, that gets harder the more you practice it, and you get worse at it the more you practice it. This gets easier at it the more you practice it. You get better at it the more you practice it. So you still have to practice it, but you practice it less and less because it just becomes who you are. Like you said, it's permeating every area of your life. And your husband gets it too.
There was never any pressure on it either. It wasn't like, well, when I see you next week, I want you to have done blah, blah, blah. There was never any of that, which I found to be wonderful as well.
It's always, as you know, invitation without expectation, because you've got to get what you need out of it. And it's not my journey, it's yours. I'm not emotionally attached to how you get there. I'm just emotionally attached to your happiness and your peace of mind and whatever that looks like. And I say that to you, I say that to all my clients, but we had to figure out what that looked like for you specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
And, it's so interesting because, we've never even sat in the same room together or anything, but it just works. And especially in a time like a pandemic where, you can't be in a room with a bunch of people you don't know, or you shouldn't be. And so, again, I think that for me has been part of the blessing about COVID and the pandemic is just that because I was forced inside, it's had some really positive outcomes for me. And, I haven't gained weight during it. I haven't lost a whole bunch either, but that's fine too. And, but I feel like I've just gained myself back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, we talk about before I invite any of my clients into the program. And know this from your own experience. I say like, hey, are you ready to kind of step away from the weight loss conversation right now to get your freedom? Because once you have your freedom, you can bring it with you into a weight loss conversation, but you can't put weight loss into a freedom conversation because it takes you in the opposite direction. So, part of the healing is learning that distinction between like, and I think what I specifically asked you, like, what's the bigger priority to you right now is like losing weight at the expense of gaining it, losing it, gaining it, losing it because you're on the same cycle that you're on? Or is your bigger priority like taking the time, the energy right now to heal this and putting down the weight loss conversation for right now, and just for any of my clients to not follow a diet and not be on that restriction wagon and not gain weight. That's like unheard of for most people because it's either a black or white. Like if you're not on it, you're off of it, like totally off the deep end, with sugar and carbs and all that good stuff, which are also labeled bad and the enemy. And it's like, no, that's not true. It's who you're being when you're using it. So all these distinctions within that. But one of the first things you had to do was break up with the weight loss mentality and really move towards health and healing and all of that good stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So powerful. I love it. So what would you say to any woman who is on the fence, about just really making the decision to go heal her struggle once and for all? Maybe she's still thinking like, hey, when I lose the weight, then I'll address all that emotional stuff. Or when I lose the weight, then I'll go, really deal with my relationship with food. Like, rather than starting another diet or reading more books or listening to more podcasts, like what would you say to anyone that is really in the place that you were just a few months ago?
My answers are kind of short and sweet, but very sincere. Do it. Trust the process. Trust yourself and trust you, Leanne, because you're amazing. And the process is amazing, but you're part of the process too, and you help every single person that you work with. And, I remember asking you when we talked, I said, I'm 65 years old because I didn't know if you only worked with like 20, 30-year-old people. And you told me, no, you gave me an age range of clients you work with. And so it made me, that made me feel like I could trust you, and I mean, that wasn't the only thing, but, it helped. I felt that I had a big trust factor with you, and that helped me a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. And just to speak to that, I'm one of those people that I don't invite anybody into the program unless I'm 1,000% sure I can help them. And it's really not a matter of age. It's a matter of are you radically committed to healing this? Are you ready to decisively choose to draw that line in the sand and say, I'm done with this cycle. The cycle needs to end. Because when somebody's anywhere other than that place, it's really hard for me if they're looking for another diet and go back to calorie counting and all that BS that doesn't work. It's one of those things we're not going to be in a place to receive it. So it's not about age. I've actually found that most people, the majority of my clients are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I work with some 30-year-olds, and in the program we have our youngest gal who's 24 years old, and we are all oh my gosh, we wish we had this when we were younger, But it's not a matter of age. It's not a demographic. It's a psychographic. It's when you're ready to have a bigger conversation, when you're at that point where you can't. That you're not willing to go down that dead end road and you need a radically different approach, and you're ready to create a lifelong forever solution, not just a short-term Band-Aid. So yeah. And I was totally transparent with you too, just like I am with every person. If I talk to anybody, I'll definitely let them know if I think I can help them or if I can't. And if not, I'll send them in the direction of whomever or whatever I think could get them to that next level. My purpose is really just to find the people that I'm put on this earth to serve, because like you, I've been where you are. And like you said a minute ago, we've never even met in person, but we're sisters. Right. We've just been through, it's when I have friends that are in Israel that have been in the military together, and they're sisters forever. It's just when you go through something like this, you're just sisters forever. And I was doing the way the program is set up. I've been doing it this way even before the pandemic. And it just shows it's not about being in person. It's about creating connection and trust and intimacy.
Right.
And that's safety. That's safety to just be where you are unapologetically and just say, this is where I am. And let it be, so that we can start moving towards acceptance and peace and freedom and happiness and joy like you are. So such a beautiful testimony to, and just another thing, it does not matter how old you are, how young you are, how far gone you are. I mean, it's just a matter how committed are you to healing? And if you have the system and you're radically committed and dedicated to finding your forever solution, absolute miracles can happen. I know some people kind of eye roll when they hear somebody say miracles. And I used to be an eye roller when I heard things like people talking about miracles, but you say you see it in the stressless eating all the time. You're in those conversations too, miracles every single week, miracle, things that I never thought would happen. So awesome.
It really does happen.
Yeah, it does. And it's happening for you. It happened for you. So thank you for sharing your truth and sharing your story. I know there's so many women that are going to benefit from this. Is there anything else you want to share before we sign off?
No, I'm just so grateful. Yes. Yeah. Me too. Emotional about my level of gratitude.
Well, I'm so grateful that you chose to share it with me and invite me into your process and just trust me with your journey and your truths and your story and your life, and I'm so grateful to you. And it shows you're a testament to what happens when you show up committed, radically committed, you do the work again. And this is just the beginning for you. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carol, for being here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are signing off for now. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard and you're interested in breaking out of your own food, body, and diet prison, here's what I want you to do next. Head on over to stresslesseating.com. That's stresslesseating.com and sign up to watch the Stressless Eating webinar, where I'll walk you through the exact 5-step game plan my female clients use to conquer emotional eating, self-sabotage, and finally heal themselves from the restrictive all-or-nothing diet mentality for good, but without obsessing or spending years in therapy to address it. I've laid it all out for you there in 5 easy steps. Remember, healing your relationship with food and your body does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance to make it happen, and we've helped clients all over the world take back their power from the food and find true and lasting freedom while enjoying life and warm chocolate chip cookies along the way. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to stresslesseating.com. I'm Leanne Ellington, and I'll see you next time.